Hello, good morning. I'd like to go ahead and welcome all of our participants and thank you all for joining today. So my name is Sarah Ishak and I will be one of the moderators along with our CEO of Wall Street Research, Alan Stone. As many of you already may be familiar with Wall Street Research, we are a 35-year-old research and consulting investor relations firm. We've been running these roadshows for quite some time nationally and recently transitioned. So today we have our client company, Jaguar Health Incorporated, who will be presenting. Jaguar is a commercial stage pharmaceutical company focused on developing novel, plant-based, non-opiate, and sustainably derived prescription medicine for people and animals. So we're going to have the president and CEO of Jaguar, Lisa Conte, present the firm today. Peter Hodge is the director of IR. He will be present. And then following the presentation, we're going to have Alan Stone present a series of questions prior to opening up the Q&A session. So to all of our participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and add those into the chat box. And we will attempt to get through as many as possible prior to the end of this call. I'll go ahead. Also, following the presentation, we will be sending out a series of emails for those of you who may be interested for any serious inquiries regarding the offering. With that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Alan Stone so we can get started.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah, and welcome everybody to the WSR virtual roadshow call with Jaguar Health today. And we're very pleased to have Lisa Conte, the CEO, present to our audience today. Jaguar trades on the NASDAQ stock market under symbol JAGX. And when I checked it this morning, it was trading about 30 cents a share, somewhere thereabouts. Lisa has some very important updates to share with our audience and to tell us about how Jaguar is unique with its plant-based medicines and FDA-approved product Mytesi, which has been in the market for several years now and growing very, very nicely, growing very fast, and has a number of new drugs and new products in development that she'll be able to share with us. And so it's a very, very interesting story. Lisa has a very talented management team and experienced board of directors. And we were on a roadshow with them about a year ago, a little more than 1 year ago, last summer in New York City. And they were doing a secondary follow-on offering at the time. And I think that was back in July and August. And we're also down in Florida with them. And so some of you, who are listening today might have heard a company present a year ago and met Lisa in person. And so this will be a great opportunity for an update for all the new developments. Let me tell you a little bit about Wall Street Research. As Sarah mentioned, we're a 40-year-old now, independent research firm. I've owned the firm for about 25 years. We're ranked #1 on Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Wall Street Research, if you Google us, we pop up as #1. We have a global following in US, Canada, Europe, Asia, and South America. We have about 110,000 subscribers now. We actually have a very, very big following in the biotech pharmaceutical industry, healthcare. We have a big following now in the cannabis industry, technology, and many other industries. We're a leader in publishing and distributing small cap research. We're working on a couple of reports right now as we speak. We just posted in the last couple of weeks a number of new reports. So we would urge people who are listening today, if you're not following getting our reports, go on our homepage and register your name and your email, and then you'll get the reports as they're published as soon as they come out. And that's at the bottom of the Wall Street Research webpage. And we're also doing virtual events a couple times a month. We're picking up our activity there. And actually now we're going to start to think about reopening some in-person roadshows, starting in about a month or so in certain locations. Down in Florida is now opening up, and California is beginning to open up a little bit in Los Angeles and Orange County. So, and then Las Vegas is starting to open up. So we're going to hope to get back in the game of in-person roadshows as soon as the authorities give us the permission to do so. And so at this point, let me turn it back over to Lisa Conte of Jaguar to give the PowerPoint presentation. That's going to be about 20 minutes. And then I'm going to have a series of questions that'll be 10 or 12 minutes or 15 minutes max. And then we'll open it up in the chat room. Please, send your questions over the chat room. And then Sarah will take your questions and Lisa will answer them. So that's our agenda for today. And again, thanks for joining us.
Should I take it away, Alan?
Yeah, it's all, the floor is yours now, Lisa.
Okay. I hear an echo. Do you hear an echo?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm very appreciative of people who get on Zoom. I know there's been a lot of Zoom meetings over the past 6 months, but here we are in our new world. I want to know that I am in my office. We just moved into new offices, saving a significant amount of money with rent reductions here in San Francisco as tech companies have exited. So there will be no photo bombs from dogs or children. And I'm going to share my screen now and start the presentation. As Alan said, it'll be about 20 minutes and then I'll be able to take questions, maybe a little bit shorter. Okay, why is it not sharing? There we go. Okay, all right, we're ready to get started. All right, I will be making some forward-looking statements. So as Sarah said, our mission is to develop novel plant-based medicines, new ways to treat gastrointestinal diseases. That has been our focus for decades. Anybody who has seen this presentation or seen me before. We recently added an initiative for mental health disorders as well. But to start, I'm quite pleased to say that we have achieved what only 1 in about 2,000 companies are able to do. We've taken a product, Mytesi, as Alan refers to it, Mytesi, but it is Mytesi, from a tree growing in the rainforest to this first-in-class FDA-approved product. This is our discovery platform, and Mytesi is plant-based, it is sustainably harvested, it is fair trade, it is organic, and it is the only oral drug approved by the FDA under botanical guidance. The generic name for Mytesi is crofelemer, and I may use that interchangeably with Mytesi, and the subsidiary of Jaguar that commercializes Mytesi is Napo Pharmaceuticals, which I may use interchangeably with Jaguar Health. The initial approval you see up there in green is for the specialty indication, and specialty often means synonymous with relatively small patient population. Specialty indication of chronic non-infectious diarrhea in adults living with HIV/AIDS on antiretroviral therapy. This is the only antidiarrheal studied and approved in this patient population. But what's even more wonderful about crofelemer, Mytesi, is what we call a pipeline in a product. Mytesi is already launched, so it already has an FDA approval, and we have revenues and growing sales that I'm going to review in a moment. But I would like to highlight here are the follow-on indications, the size of those patient populations, and the number of patients in need globally that can benefit from Mytesi and crofelemer. The furthest progressed is on the top here. and it's Mytesi for cancer therapy-related diarrhea. We'll refer to that as CTD. It's about to enter a single pivotal trial in the fourth quarter of this year, around the corner, based on agreement with the FDA on protocol, enrollment criteria, endpoint definition. That's been about 2 years of negotiation with the FDA. The other follow-on indications in development include irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, supportive care, idiopathic functional diarrhea. We have a rare disease, pediatric congenital diarrheal disease and short bowel syndrome. And we even have a second generation anti-secretory agent under development with NIAID funding for the global scourge of cholera. For most of these indications, remember this is a product that's already approved. For most of these indications, we also have phase 2 proof of concept data. So in case you get bored during this presentation, or you have to take a break, or you have a computer meltdown, let me give you the 4 important takeaway messages, and I'll repeat them at the end as well. We have commercial sales of Mytesi, which transformed this company in the second quarter of this year, driving to a financially sustainable base commercial business in 2021. Secondly, we have a single pivotal phase 3 study in agreement with the FDA for the follow-on indication of Mytesi for cancer therapy-related diarrhea, and that's starting around the corner, literally in October, fourth quarter of this year. We have, when we talk about cholera, we have an opportunity for a priority review voucher pathway with the FDA, which is worth on average $137 million. I'll be talking about that more. And this provides an opportunity for a risk mitigated funding opportunity for the company and investors relative to a pure equity play. I'll be talking more about that. And then the last thing is we recently initiated a new psychoactive drug research and discovery program. It's called Entheogen Therapeutics Initiative. And there is a first lead compound in that initiative identified that has a novel mechanism of action. So let me first address the commercial business, again, striving to become financially sustainable in 2021 for Mytesi for the current indication of HIV-related diarrhea. First, the product performance is important. This is a summary, some graphs from the pivotal trial for HIV. Patients entered the study with an average of 20 loose watery stools per week. By the end of the study, 87% of the patients had at least a 50% decrease in watery stools, and 100% or 50% had 100% reduction. So 50% the diarrhea was gone. We instituted a comprehensive patient access program in April of this year based on learnings from the past 2 years being out there in the market. And we were able to grow sales in the second quarter of this year, the quarter in which the patient access program was launched, to $6.3 million. So you can see the remarkable growth there in the last, on the right, the bar chart on the right. So what that represents is a 482% increase over the second quarter of 2019. And then when we take out Medicaid, ADAP, and other chargeback, net sales came in at $3.2 million in the second quarter. That's a 378% increase over the same quarter a year ago in 2019. I'd like to also point out, as we're all sitting here on Zoom, this was achieved in the second quarter of this year. Our reps were sheltered at home. There were no rep visits. We have about 11 people on the sales team, no rep visits in the second quarter. We now have about 75% of our reps are able to go out and make a difference and make face-to-face calls. So it's really a testament. This growth is a testament to the value of patient-focused programs in the complex U.S. healthcare environment. So the Expanded Access Program ensures that no patient is denied access to Mytesi due to cost. And as I said, it came after hard-won learning in the commercial market by us over the past 2 years. So one of the key things is the program increases the copay for patients. So no patient pays more than $25. And this includes, this is a chronically administered product. If they are filling a prescription for 4 months, they pay no more than $25. So It's like, $6 per month that they're paying. There's no cost for drug. There's no cost drug for a patient assistance program for those that fall through the cracks. There is a patient hub service, and that supports prior authorizations, appeals, and a patient call center, meaning that we have a service provider that will sit on the phone with the patient's insurance company if that's what's necessary. And we're preparing this month, you'll be hearing about this very soon, to transition to a specialty pharmaceutical model for the specialty HIV indication. And that improves dramatically the expense that we have for distribution costs. Okay, so how does a microcap company like Jaguar get to the global marketplace for potential blockbuster indications that are represented in our product pipeline? Our strategy has been and is to access, mobilize, fund our pipeline through non-dilutive pharmaceutical partnerships. We hold global unencumbered rights for an FDA-approved product for a chronic indication, meaning we have chronic safety studies completed. We obviously are engaged in commercial GMP manufacturing since we market Mytesi. Safety and CMC, chemistry manufacturing controls, are the two most common reasons why filed new drug applications fail. And for most of those follow-on indications, as I mentioned, we have phase 2 or proof of concept data. It's a remarkable risk mitigated opportunity for pharmaceutical partnering, and it's late stage, and cancer is always a very attractive area for pharmaceutical partnering. The balance of our strategy, as I mentioned, is to build recognition for all our stakeholders, and that's to get the base commercial HIV business to break even. It's essentially living within our financial means for the current HIV sales. Q2 of this year was transformative. You could see that in the revenues. Those net revenues will continue to grow each quarter, and we expect to be a sustainable financial commercial business in 2021. We actually thought we were going to get there a little bit sooner, but Corona knocked us down just a bit, but not so much that we're not going to get there. Okay, back to our pipeline. I'm going to focus on 3 follow indications, with our first priority being cancer therapy-related diarrhea. And it's worth a short digression to explain how Mytesi works, and therefore why it can benefit so many indications. Many of us think about antidiarrheals as Imodium, loperamide. You go to the drugstore, OTC agents you might pick up. These are acute acting antimotility agents, and they are opioids. Mytesi is notable for what it's not. It's not an opioid, it's not an antimotility, therefore does not slow down GI tract causing constipation. It's not an antibiotic, hence no resistance. It's non-addictive, and it's locally acting, meaning no meaningful systemic absorption, no drug-drug interaction. This is very important in complicated patients, such as those living with HIV, those living with cancer, and the life-saving therapies that they are on. What Mytesi does do as a first-in-class anti-secretory agent is it normalizes ion flow, water flow, GI function in the gut with a remarkable safety profile. No different than placebo in dozens of published clinical trials and thousands of patient administrations. So let's turn to the cancer opportunity now. Cancer therapy-related diarrhea afflicts about 50 to 80% of treated cancer patients. There's no antidiarrheal studied or approved in cancer patients. The same situation, the same opportunity that we faced in developing Mytesi for HIV. Our surveys indicate cancer patients experiencing on average 28 loose watery stools a week. Remember, HIV was about 20. And in many cases, to the point where not only are we addressing patient comfort issues, which is important enough, we're also talking about a severity that potentially requires the patient to take a drug holiday or a dose reduction of their life-saving cancer therapy. There have also been incidences of dehydration-related deaths in clinical trials with targeted cancer therapies These include tyrosine kinase inhibitors and/or epidermal growth factor receptor antibodies. The mechanism of the diarrhea is intrinsic in how these agents work, and it is a mechanism perfectly matched to the novel anti-secretory mechanism of action of Mytesi or crofelemer. To put supportive care in perspective, chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting products generate global sales in excess of $2 billion annually, and this is typically an acute treatment. Diarrhea is more of a chronic situation in adjuvant therapy, which could last for a year or more. So as I mentioned, we've been in discussions with the FDA for almost 2 years, and the reason for that is you can have a product that is safe and effective, but if you don't have a trial design that is matched to your mechanism of action, an endpoint that shows that efficacy, you could end up with a trial where you have to explain the drug worked, but the endpoint didn't work, and you have to go back to the drawing board. So since we know the endpoint based on our HIV pivotal trial, we worked with the cancer division and the GI division to get the protocol that will demonstrate the efficacy to the satisfaction, the statistical satisfaction of approval. So the agreement that we have from the FDA is our safety studies are acceptable and no new non-clinical tox studies are required. Number two, our manufacturing is acceptable. Of course, we already manufacture the product for commercial use. And then the third point, since Mytesi is not systemically absorbed, we have no requirement for drug-drug interaction studies. And that is quite meaningful because there's a very large number of cancer agents out there. That could have been a large number of studies. The target label for the trial results is the symptomatic relief of diarrhea in adult patients with solid tumors receiving targeted cancer therapies with or without cyclochemotherapy. And this is an approval which will take account of a basket of chemotherapeutic agents. It is not limited to 1 or 2 different cancer agents. The proof of concept study for this indication was a dog study with diarrhea induced in healthy dogs by the human tyrosine kinase inhibitor, neratinib, which has particularly severe diarrhea liability, over 90%. And dogs are a remarkably predictive model of the human mechanism of action of Mytesi. In this study, which was conducted without prophylaxis with loperamide, which is often used prophylactically in humans, even though it's never been studied specifically for cancer-related diarrhea, there was a 30% reduction in the incidence and severity of diarrhea. Patients, the dogs, were able to tolerate about 20% higher dose of neratinib, and the crofelemer dose patients were also able to better maintain the neratinib treatment. It's exactly the benefits that we're looking for in the human experience. And this study was funded by Puma, which is the manufacturer of neratinib and commercialized neratinib for the human marketplace, and faces quite a bit of difficulty in the utilization of their product because of diarrhea. There's an ongoing investigator-initiated trial at Georgetown in humans, women with breast cancer receiving Herceptin, and this is funded by Genentech. It's taken quite some time to enroll, in part because of Corona and patients not being able to come into the clinic. I'm happy to say the last patient has been enrolled with 3 months of treatment. This is investigator-initiated, so we have nothing to do with this trial. We can't put our hands on it at all. The data should come out by the first half of 2021, but I want to note, as an investigator-initiated trial, this is not a prerequisite for the initiation of our pivotal trial in the 4th quarter of this year. You could almost look at the value of this as pre-education and pre-market, and it will most likely get published and be presented at ASCO, the big cancer meetings. And if you'd like to hear more about the cancer indication and the importance and sort of elevating the awareness of supportive care, and in particular diarrhea, because there are no antidiarrheal agents studied in cancer patients, so it's a latent market opportunity. On October 20th, we're hosting an education R&D virtual day for investors and potential corporate partners, all focused on cancer therapy-related diarrhea. We're going to have key opinion leaders, patients, caregivers talking about managing diarrhea. Just yesterday, I was inspired. I completed an interview with a woman named Dee Dee Jean-Rowe. She is an American icon, 36-time participant in the Iditarod, the dog race, Musher in Alaska. She finished second twice, I think 16 times she finished in the top 10. She's had remarkable other challenges in life, many of them health challenges, including breast cancer. And she spoke quite candidly of her breast cancer journey and how diarrhea affected her treatment and persisted even during recovery for 5 years after she was off her different treatments. So it really will be an educational and inspiring day. It'll be about 90 minutes and you can register. There's a link there. If you Google, you can find information on this event and get registered for it. So we have an interesting animal health play with crofelemer. Canalevia is a dog-specific formulation of crofelemer for dogs that receive chemotherapy. And this is about 25% of the dogs who get chemotherapy suffer from chemotherapy-induced diarrhea. And this is the equivalent of an orphan indication in humans. It's called MUMS for animals. We have filed all the requisite technical pieces of the new animal drug application. We expect to get approval under MUMS, under orphan designation in the first half of 2021. And this will not only be for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs, but also another indication, exercise-induced diarrhea in dogs. And think about the Iditarod that I just mentioned, Iditarod dogs, extreme physical stress and mental stress as well. Jaguar is maintaining the commercial rights to the veterinary application. Specifically, we're not seeking veterinary partnerships that might complicate the human partnerships that we're pursuing. And a third human indication for crofelemer in development is the rare disease indication of pediatric congenital diarrheal disease, ultra rare in the US, maybe 5,000 patients or so. Though as a congenital disease, it is much more prevalent in cultures where you have consanguineous marriages. So we are planning a proof of concept study, a human trial, where we can have greater access to patient enrollment. This will be in the first half of 2021, and it's in collaboration with the Sheikh Khalifa Medical City in Abu Dhabi and Harvard's Children's Hospital. This is a partnership, potential corporate partner interest to the many companies that are focused on a rare disease strategy. We are not a company focused on a rare disease strategy, but those companies that are have great interest in this program. And the final human indication that I'm going to speak to today is a second generation plant-based anti-secretory agent, exactly how crofelemer works, for the devastating, life-threatening dehydration caused by cholera. What kills you in cholera is not the cholera infection, it's the dehydration. The death zone is considered the first 6 to 18 hours after infection. So a published clinical trial of crofelemer treated cholera patients and generated a reduction in dehydration of about 30% in the first 6 hours after administration, which is considered life-saving. We now have the NIH funding preclinical studies for the second generation anti-secretory termed lequidity. It's derived from the same plant material as crofelemer, works by the same mechanism of action. Why not crofelemer? Because the return opportunity comes from a program called the Tropical Disease Priority Review Voucher Program, which is only available for a first indication of a product. So crofelemer is already approved for HIV. This would not be available for crofelemer. This would be available for lequidity. Lequidity works the same way as crofelemer. In fact, lequidity is one of our animal health products, and we demonstrated that it works the same way. So this voucher, these vouchers are transferable. They sell for about $137 million on average. It is received upon approval for cholera, for the tropical disease. So the way it works is you get to have incentive to develop a product for a tropical disease. The FDA has provided what's considered a prize. It's a voucher that you can put to any product, and it requires the FDA to review that new drug application for any product in 6 months. So the reason why they sell for so much, and you can see the range here, that several $100 million, is if a large company, for example, is pursuing another blood pressure medicines that could be billions of dollars, or a checkpoint inhibitor, and they're in a race with another company, having months or a year lead time to get that product on the market, you NPV it back, and that's what they're prepared to pay for the voucher. We have prepared a really fascinating risk mitigated investment proposal based on the value of this voucher. And I say risk mitigated relative to a pure equity investment in the company. So if anybody is interested, any accredited investor that is interested, we will put you under CDA, and Alan referred to this when he was giving an introduction. He'll do a follow-up communication with you, get your name and your contact information to us, and we can tell you about this offering, which I think is a really nice alternative, and as I said, a risk mitigated way to participate in the company and to do something really important, which is to get a novel agent out there for cholera, which is a scourge in Yemen right now, kills millions of people every single year, typically children under the age of 5. And then my final message is an Entheogen therapeutic initiative. Entheogen, the word, refers to psychoactive agents. It's also the derivative of enthusiasm, so we're enthusiastically in this field. And we're targeting mental health and mood disorders, unmet needs afflicting hundreds of millions of patients globally, growing by the day. And we have a proprietary plant collection of about 2,300 plants, 3,500 plant extracts that we can mobilize here. It's another asset that we have, with firsthand rainforest field investigations with shaman, Jaguar scientists, a database of firsthand knowledge. For 30 years, we have deprioritized any plants that had psychoactive properties or psychedelic properties. Now, the FDA is giving breakthrough status to compounds such as psilocybin, MDMA for depression and other indications, a regulatory pathway that did not exist 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So we've decided to bring back the interdisciplinary team that initiated and implemented the discovery process 30 years ago. This is the discovery platform that resulted in the discovery of a novel first-in-class anti-secretory agent, of course, Mytesi. So we did it before. We are enthusiastic and energized to do it again. There are, if you follow the field at all, there's about 8 well-known psychoactive agents now in clinical trials. These are all synthesized. Our mission is to find the next generation as yet unknown mechanism of action and bring those proprietary plant-based compounds to clinical development through partnerships with pharmaceutical companies that have the clinical skill set and commitment to address mood and mental disorder drug development. We'll focus on what we're good at, which is identifying the plant-based compounds and, of course, the sustainable supply. I'm pleased to say we've already identified a first compound from the traditional use of a plant. It's for schizophrenia and psychoses. It comes from an ethnobotanical expedition we sponsored over 20 years ago. It's interesting because it comes from a plant that we collected based on anti-infective use. It was deprioritized 20 years ago because it had psychoactive effects as well. And it has now emerged from animal and in vitro studies with a potential new mechanism of action for, as I said, for schizophrenia and psychoses and other mental health indications. Okay, I continue to believe that we are the most undervalued microcap company that exists, which is why it's sort of interesting to think about investment vehicles that don't solely focus on the equity value of the company, since sometimes it's inexplicable. We have cleaned up most of the warrants on our balance sheet unless they are owned by long-term investors that don't trade around those warrants, that have been in the company or been in the technology for over 20 years. We have no anti-dilution. We have no resets. With yesterday's close, we have a valuation only of about $13 million. That's less than 1 times gross sales. If we annualized our revenues from the second quarter, as if we didn't even grow from the second quarter, which is not the case. It's a valuation that's also only a 1.2 multiple on net sales. If we look at comparable pharmaceutical companies with revenues, they have multiples of anywhere from 5 to 36 times net sales. So based on objective financial measurements that we can now move the company into a comparative situation as we have had this really transformative commercial event based on our patient access programs. We have many upcoming milestones, most of which are clinical and commercially oriented. These are meaty milestones. We have a remarkable management team and board of directors. 10 of us have been together for over 15 years. 3 of us have been together for over 30 years. This is the team that is responsible for bringing Mytesi to FDA approval. And let me highlight Dr. Pravin Chaturvedi. He has 7 FDA-approved drugs to his name, which I don't know anybody who has that. And he has been responsible and taken the leadership for the past 2 years with the regulatory and the clinical strategy for the CTD, the cancer therapy diarrhea-related indication with the FDA. Ian Wendt, I'd like to highlight him as well in commercial. He devised and implemented the patient access program that will drive us to financial sustainability. And then Dr. Stephen King, our chief ethnobotanist and co-founder from 30 years ago, he's leading the Entheogen initiative and the interdisciplinary scientific strategy team that we've brought back together. Our board of directors is strong and has substantial investment in the company, and they're small and nimble enough to get things done. And finally, our key investment highlights are summarized here, but simply put, those 4 take-home messages are: we have commercial sales of Mytesi, transformed the company in the second quarter of this year. We should be financially sustainable for the commercial business next year. We have a single pivotal trial after 2 years of negotiation with the FDA starting in the 4th quarter of this year. And that is a key driver for corporate partnerships. Cancer is always a key driver in corporate partnerships. We have the cholera priority review voucher pathway with the FDA on average worth about $137 million, and that's an opportunity for risk mitigated funding relative to a pure equity play. Just contact me. We have to go under CDA to learn more about that. And then we've initiated this new psychoactive drug research and discovery program, another asset that we can mobilize through corporate partnerships. And I'll leave those investment highlights up. Thank you very much for listening and persevering through another Zoom, and I'm available for questions. I think they're going to come from Alan. Oh, so I have to stop sharing the screen, right? Stop sharing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Lisa, for a very informative, excellent presentation. It was a very, very good overview. And I wrote some of these questions out a few days ago before I saw the PowerPoint, so there might be a little duplicity here, what you've covered, but I'll try to minimize that as best I can. First of all, maybe you can give us a little history in terms of when was Jaguar started, how long ago, how was the company formed, and have there been any key mergers or acquisitions that you've had that you should talk about?
Sure, thanks, Alan. And a little bit of the complexity of the history may explain why we are the hidden gem and the undervalued at this moment. So when I refer to 30 years ago, started a company with a basic discovery platform of leveraging knowledge from the brain forest 30 years ago. That was with Steve King and several members of the team now. That company was called Shaman and evolved into the name Napo. Napo is one of the largest tributaries into the Amazon. In 2008, we licensed Mytesi, crofelemer, which was not yet approved, to a commercial partner. And that commercial partner, after they licensed it, felt they had a competitive situation. So that became a 6-year legal battle for us to get the product back. Well, that legal battle was going on. We spun out Jaguar Health and focused on some of the animal health opportunities, and that company went public in 2015. About 2.5 years ago, we settled, we prevailed. After 6 years, the NAPO organization did, we got the product back. And then we merged back into Jaguar Health. So Jaguar Health is the public parent company. NAPO is a wholly owned subsidiary. About 98% of what we do is human focused. And it's one of the reasons why I talk about the transformation of the commercial strategy, the informed commercial transformation in the second quarter of this year. We got this product back. It was dropped into our lap with no money, no expertise, no skill set in commercializing a product, one single product. And so we went out there and we did it and got it to patients' hands for 2 years. But it took a lot of learning about this very complex insurance system, healthcare system that we have in the US. How do you remove barriers for patients to be able to get reimbursed for their product? And so we got it together now, and that's why the company has transformed, and it's one big happy company at this time.
Excellent. How long have you been traded now on the NASDAQ stock market?
So Jaguar has been traded since 2016. The human asset was first commercialized by Jaguar, then after the acquisition of NAPO and the product. So when it was first commercialized, it was only animals. I mean, when it was first public, I'm sorry, not trading on NASDAQ, it was only animals. So the human product came into the picture in April of 2018. And, you know, sales now each quarter exceed what we had in the first 12 months of commercialization.
Great. And I see that your average volume runs about 6 million shares per day, which is quite impressive for a small company and a microcap company. What do you attribute that liquidity to? And I guess that bodes for the opportunity for shareholder growth if you can get the message out to new people.
Yeah, we've always had huge volume, and we do have, well, we have an interesting shareholder base. We have about 30 to 40% long-term investors. So as you heard that history, we've had investors who've been with us for 30 years, including one of our board members, invested in every single financing for 30 years. We don't really have any other, you know, the traditional small cap institutions, you know, they traded in and out of the company. So I learned the school of hard knocks, what it was like to be a microcap company. So the rest of it seems to be retail. And we, you know, we churn a lot of shares on the retail. So you're right, it does provide opportunities when we put out meaningful news for people to be able to get in and out of the company and therefore get the value recognized of the news that we put out.
Very interesting. What financings have you completed in the past 18 or 24 months that are particularly relevant that you can talk about?
Just a couple of months ago, we did in July of 2019, we did a financing to really pull together this commercial strategy and get the company to break even. So that was wonderful. What wasn't wonderful about that financing is it came with 2 sets of warrants. And those warrants, as I learned, was just causing a lot of pressure on the stock as those institutions didn't hold the stock that they bought in the offering, they just traded around those warrants. So we did a warrant price reduction in return for exercising the warrants just a couple of months ago to clean up the warrants. So our balance sheet, as I said, with one exception, those warrants on my balance sheet are now held by long-term investors. There's not trading around those warrants. What we have said publicly is we are interested in non-dilutive financing to fund the pipeline. So the money that we have in the bank drives us to commercial sustainability, but what about that cancer program? And one of the corporate partnerships are a source of non-dilutive financing, and another source are royalty funding. We have significant revenues and are able to bring in some royalty financing. But we had a preferred investor that was able to block us doing royalty financing. So we were able to transfer that preferred into friendlier hands in a perpetual preferred. It's not a participating preferred, it's a perpetual preferred. And now we've removed the blockade for non-dilutive financing, such as royalty financing, which is something that we would very seriously consider going forward. But for this audience, probably the most important thing is, as I've said, we have a very interesting financing proposal based on the tropical disease voucher. I have to have investors under CDA, but it takes the pressure off focusing just on our share price.
Thank you. Very good. Now I see that that the Mytesi did gross sales of about 6.3 million and net sales of 3.2 million for the most recent quarter, which is a very dramatic increase from the levels in the preceding 4 or 5 quarters. What is stimulating that growth, and that particularly during COVID? What's making that happen?
It's the patient access program and all the programs that I mentioned. This is what would happen. An HIV patient would go into the doctor. Because we're a small company with one product, we don't have deals with the insurance companies where, here's our 10 products, make this one tier 1 and we'll give you a break on the cost of this one. So almost always the patients had a prior authorization, and prior authorizations would require work from the physician to submit to the insurance company. Almost always the insurance company kicks it back, and then you have to submit it again. The patient would have to call to find. We're talking about diarrhea. At this point they would say, screw it and go get Pepto-Bismol or something like that, which is not satisfactory, but it's a lot of stress just to go through the prior authorization. So to be able to have these services where we can help the physician to the extent we're allowed to, we can't do medical work, but we can do administrative work to help the patient deal with the insurance company, to deal with the appeals. We have a fast start program. When all this is going on, we can immediately send product to the patient. So at least they're immediately getting the therapy. We'll work this out over the next couple of weeks. So to be able to provide all these services, this collection of services, to get the patient product, to make sure they get reimbursed. It also provides reminders and facilitates refills. Remember, this is a chronic indication. So imagine our average patient prescription is about 3 months. If you increase that by just 1 month, you're increasing sales by 1/3. And then we did have a price adjustment to deal with the cost of these programs, and put all that together. The sales reps were stuck at home. The growth was like 5-6-fold on the second quarter from the first quarter. It is continuing to grow. It's obviously not going to grow exponentially each quarter, but that exponential growth has happened, and now will continue to grow, and that will get us to sustainability, and hopefully things will continue to move back to normal for the rep healthcare provider relationship.
Very good. Maybe you could just recap briefly. Where are you in the pipeline with your number 2 and number 3 drugs and products that are in the pipeline, and how far along are they in the process at this point?
So in the pipeline, the number 1 drug is the Mytesi. It's literally this exact product for cancer therapy related diarrhea. So manufacturing's done. This is a chronic indication for HIV. Safety is done. It's the exact same dose, the exact same pill, and the protocol is approved now. The IND is activated, and that trial will be starting, as I've said, the 4th quarter. Literally, it's going to be starting next month, the month of October. So it's very exciting. And that's as you can imagine, I'm in corporate partner discussions. I've said that publicly. That's a key benchmark for bringing corporate partnerships and to consummation, because you've shown that you have the FDA agreement now. So that's very, very exciting. It's such a dramatic need. Please do come to Diarrhea Dialogues. You'll hear how important this is for the patient, comfort, dignity, but also these medicines, there's like, 30 tyrosine kinase inhibitors, epidermal growth factor receptor antibodies. They cannot be utilized if this diarrhea is not managed. Patients have to reduce the dose. We have also our orphan crofelemer. So that's not this pill, it's crofelemer, the powder in a liquid formulation for rare diseases. And that is going to be in clinical trials next year. There is some animal cell culture work that's being done at Children's Hospital at Harvard right now that the FDA required before we went into the children's study. That being said, crofelemer has been in children as young as 3 months of age, and we've seen no safety issues, nothing different than placebo. And then the cholera program, which is very exciting. That's the one with the special funding opportunity. The cholera program is, we did clinical trials with crofelemer. They're published, they're wonderful, but we can't get the voucher with crofelemer. So we went back to the second generation leflumer. It's about 1/30th, 1/10th the price to manufacture. So it's a price point that's more relevant for parts of the world where cholera is a problem, emerging economies, et cetera. And it had to go through preclinical work since it is a different product. And the NIH is funding that work. So they're just about completed with that preclinical work. And then we'll be able to go into clinical trials, which will be exactly the same design as we did with crofelemer. That is subject to funding, and it's part of this earmarked special situation that we talked about with the voucher. And then Entheogen, our novel agent for schizophrenia and psychoses, we will not take that into clinical development. That is not our skill set. It's wonderful that the FDA is now working with psychoactive and psychedelic compounds. We'll partner with companies like Compass, which just went public, MAPS, Etai, that have, those are potential partners that have the skill set to take these agents into clinical trial. And just like we negotiated for 2 years on cancer, they negotiate a trial design that will show the activity of these compounds to regulatory satisfaction.
Very, very interesting. And you might have just answered some of the things that are in my next question. I was going to ask about where are you in your relationships with big pharma? Are there any possibilities of doing any kind of financing events with big pharma where you get some kind of a milestone payment or some financing up front and then some sort of licensing or royalty arrangements? Any of those discussions in the works?
Absolutely. Discussions are in the works all over the place. One of the issues that we have is, the value of this pipeline. We're talking about multiple blockbuster indications: IBS, cancer, IBD, HIV is specialty, but these others are quite large, and they're all the same product, so you can't really split the product up. So we're looking for a very, very large deal. And we have to be realistic about where our valuation is right now. So we're not going to sell out cheap. So what we're looking at is sort of geographical specific deals that are smaller, that will help us bring in non-dilutive dollars, help fund the programs, help get the valuation of the company recognized, and then we're in a better position to do very, very large deals. And it's taken some time, after the merger, after learning what it was going to take to sell Mytesi, and sometimes I think it's easier to sell a dream and a vision than it is to sell actual revenues, which were not growing as fast as we wanted them to grow. To clean up the warrants from some of the deals that we had done in the microcap area. And now is really a transformative time for the company to be able to crawl out of this microcap valuation.
Yeah, no, it seems like you've accomplished so many great things in the year since we had our last roadshow with you, and where you were successful with that offering. And congratulations on all that growth and accomplishment. And you seem, enormously well positioned now for the future. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now, who can take some questions that have come in from the audience, and we'll kind of respond to the people that are listening in, and take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Alan, and it's a great presentation. So we have only a couple of questions. I'll go ahead and start off with this one from Marshall. He wants to know, what is the timeline for the cancer phase 3 trial? And how many patients are treated for how long?
It's about, thank you for the question. It's about 240 patients. It's one dose, and we don't have to do any dose escalation or whatever because it's already approved at a particular dose. So it'll be 120 Mytesi, 120 placebo. Patients will be treated for 3 cycles of chemo, so about 3 months. We're looking at the reduction of diarrhea during that period of time. And the entire trial is scheduled to take a little less than 2 years. It'll take us about 2 years to get the drug completed, get the data pulled together, get the supplemental NDA on file. And then for supplemental NDA, it's about 6-month approval. So we have projections for the second half of 2023, and therefore are building inventory now for sales in the second half of 2023, which is a substantially larger target market than we have right now for HIV.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Now we just have one other question regarding your earnings per share. It says, when will EPS go positive?
So as I said, for our commercial business, we expect to get there to sustainability positive by next year, 2021. I'd say the second half of 2021. Now, we are also planning to fund our clinical programs. I'm looking to do that through non-dilutive corporate partnerships, other financing mechanisms that are non-dilutive to our stock price.
Okay, great. That's pretty much it, Alan. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you so we can wrap.
Okay, yeah, so one final question, addressing the company's valuation. Do you have any metrics from some other potentially comparable companies that you'd like to talk about? I know at a $15 million market cap, it's very unusual for a NASDAQ biotech pharma with a product successful, in the marketplace to be trading that low. Maybe you can comment on that a little bit, Lisa.
Sure. I could not even find a comp with a company that had revenues like us and valuation like we do. There's not even anybody out there. So as we looked at companies such as Heron I like because they have a product approved for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, and then they have a pipeline. Their product has been kicked back a couple of times from the FDA for manufacturing issues, but so it's not approved yet for pain, which is a much larger indication. So you think about our product for HIV, diarrhea, and then our deep pipeline. The difference is our pipeline is the same product, so it's a risk mitigated pipeline. That company is valued over $1 billion. Look like Avondale. They have sort of revenues that roll in. They don't even have a sales force of about $50 million. They're valued at a couple of $100 million. Look at Red Hill, same thing, couple of $100 million. I can't even find anything that's comparable to us in the micro cap area. So we need to get that story out. We need to get some recognition for the value that we have in this company. And I do think that there were some perhaps balance sheet issues that were preventing that from happening for a while.
Very good. Sarah, any other questions that are out there in the chat room, or you're on mute?
Sorry. No other questions so far, so.
Okay. All right, so it looks like we're just coming up on the 1 hour. So I think this was a very informative and illuminative performance. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing the Jaguar Health story with our audience. And I just want to remind people that there'll be a follow-up note that'll probably go out tomorrow with a recap and a video replay of this event. So if you want to, hear parts of it that you might have missed, you're welcome to see the video replay. Also, the financing that Lisa alluded to, the special financing for accredited investors. If you have interest in that, there'll be a question, and you just have to respond and and Lisa will be able to get you the NDA for that financing. So, so at this point, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation. Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you, Sarah, and Mark, and Peter, and we look forward to being in touch with you very shortly.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Alan. Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you, Lisa.
Bye, Peter.
Okay.
Thanks to all our participants as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.